Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a sacred space where your mind can rest and your spirit can rise. As you prepare to sleep, this powerful message will wash over your heart with peace, clarity, and divine motivation. This is not just a speech, it's a spiritual encounter. Let every word realign you with purpose, silence your fears, and awaken your faith. Tonight you are not falling asleep with stress. You are falling into God's strategy. Let this 7-hour journey renew your soul, recalibrate your vision, and remind you that even in the quiet hours, God is still working. Peace is your portion tonight. God doesn't waste time because He created it and holds it in His hand, not like a ticking clock, but like a holy assignment every hour of your life carries. Divine intention, and whether you are running in the day or resting in the night, He is actively present, the Creator of the universe, who formed the stars and called them by name, is not silent. When darkness falls, He is still speaking, still moving, still orchestrating details on your behalf. While the world demands productivity and urgency, God is looking for your stillness. He is looking for you to release control so He can release provision. He is not in a hurry because He already sees the outcome from the beginning. He is not rattled by your delays. He is not anxious about your timeline, and He is certainly not interested in rushing you through a process meant to grow you for something greater. The nights were not made for panic. They were designed for peace, the kind of peace that surpasses all understanding, the kind of peace that enters the room like a whisper and pushes back every heavy thought that tried to follow you into your bed. You were never meant to carry the weight of the day into the silence of the night. You were meant to lay it down and trust that the God who watched over you while you were working will still be watching over you while you are resting. There is no power in worry, no breakthrough in overthinking, no revelation in rehearsing your fears, but there is power in rest, in letting your body sleep while your spirit communes with heaven. Every second of your life matters to God. Every pause, every waiting season, every door that hasn't opened yet, every opportunity that seems delayed, it's all being worked together with perfect precision. The nights you cried, the hours you questioned, the seasons where it felt like nothing moved forward. They are not forgotten. They are not wasted. They are invested in building your endurance, strengthening your faith, and positioning your heart for something that cannot be taken from you. When God invests, He doesn't invest in comfort. He invests in transformation. And transformation often happens in the stillness. The soil of who you are becomes fertile in the dark. It is in the hidden places, the quiet rooms, the silent prayers that God does His deepest work. He is not interested in performance. He is after depth, and that depth grows slowly beneath the surface, away from the eyes of people, away from applause, away from distraction. When you sleep, your mind may shut down, but your spirit remains open. And when you choose to meditate on truth, instead of worry, you welcome the presence of God into your subconscious, allowing Him to plant wisdom where fear once lived, to sow direction where confusion once ruled. God never sends you into a day without equipping you in the night. But when your night is filled with fear, the equipment gets lost in the noise. What if instead of replaying your mistakes, you began to declare His promises? What if instead of planning from panic, you rested in expectation? What if instead of asking why, you simply whispered yes? What if your surrender was the strategy God was waiting on? What if He's not asking you to figure it out, but to trust that it's already finished because the battle is not yours and the pressure was never meant to rest on your shoulders? He invites you to lay it down, to lie still, to breathe deeply and know that He is God and you are not, and that's not weakness, that's freedom. You were not built to be your own source. You were not designed to carry burdens that heaven has already addressed. You don't need to panic in the midnight hour, because God does His finest miracles when the world sleeps. The same God who brought water from a rock, who opened seas, who silenced storms and raised the dead, still moves in the midnight hour, and He's not done with your story just because the lights are off and the world is quiet. He is still scripting a testimony that will be worth the wait you see when you stop working. God starts showing you what real progress looks like, not built by striving but by surrender, not secured by hustle but by hope, not held together by effort but by the everlasting arms of a Father who never slumbers. He doesn't sleep, so He doesn't rest because He is your rest, and every time you try to earn what He already gave, you drain yourself trying to fight battles that were already won. Grace is not just for the day, it's for the night too. And peace is not just for your morning routine. It's for your deepest hour of sleep when you don't even realize He is restoring what the day tried to steal you, are not falling behind just because the world runs fast. You are not losing just because you don't see results. You are not lazy for taking time to rest. You are obedient because rest is a spiritual discipline, and God honors those who honor the rhythm He designed. He didn't create you to operate 24 hours a day. He created you to trust Him with the hours you cannot control. And when you release those hours back to Him, He fills them with what you could never earn, while awake favor guidance, strength, and supernatural clarity. So tonight, before you let worry wander through your thoughts, before you rehearse the worst-case scenarios, before you lie awake wondering how and when and why, remember this rest is worship. Trusting God is warfare, and your silence speaks louder than your stress. You are not doing nothing. When you are doing the most important thing, letting God take over and do what only He can do, faith is not a feeling, and it is not wishful thinking. It is not a soft word. For hope or a casual synonym for optimism, faith is the invisible structure beneath your steps. It is the steel framework beneath every act of obedience. It is the unseen force that carries your dream from imagination to manifestation, from concept to construction, from vision to reality. When God places a dream in your spirit, it is not for you to admire it. It is for you to act on it. But you will never move toward it without faith, because the dream is always bigger than your logic, always heavier than your ability, and always farther than your natural reach, which is why God didn't. Had asked for proof. He asked for faith. He didn't wait for credentials. He waited for surrender, because what He has for you cannot be earned. It must be believed dreams are, given in silence in moments where the world isn't watching, in the deep, quiet places of the heart, where no applause reaches and no confirmation comes, in the early hours and late nights when you're still enough to hear the whisper of what could be. And that whisper is holy not because it is loud, but because it is divine, but the dream alone will not take. You there, it must be carried across the bridge of faith, that invisible crossing that takes you from just seeing it to truly stepping into it. And that bridge is not built with perfect confidence. It is built with imperfect steps toward a perfect God. When you wake up and you see nothing that matches the dream, when your surroundings are shouting lack and your bank account whispers no and your friends don't understand and your past keeps trying to talk you down, it's faith that makes you put your feet on the ground anyway. It's faith that makes you take. The meeting, write the idea, make the call, try again, not because you're guaranteed the outcome, but because you trust the one who gave you the vision. And faith isn't the absence of fear. It's the refusal to let fear dictate the pace it's choosing to move forward, while afraid choosing to build when it looks barren, choosing to prepare for rain, or when the sky is still clear. Faith doesn't require you to know how only to believe that God does. Faith doesn't demand resources, it activates them. Faith doesn't make the journey easy, but it makes it possible. And every builder of something great has had to walk across this invisible bridge carrying nothing but a word from God, a vision in their spirit, and a heart that refused to back down when it didn't make sense. It is faith that converts dreams into blueprints and blueprints into bricks. It is faith that makes the unknown worth walking into. It is faith that makes the delay worth enduring. It is faith that turns what if into even if your dream was never meant to stay locked inside the safety of your imagination. It was meant to breathe in the real world, to touch lives, to shift atmospheres, to break generational patterns, to open doors for others to rise and build. And the first brick of that journey is belief. Belief that if God gave it to you, He will help you build it. Belief that if He said go, He's already prepared the ground ahead. Belief that you are not too late. Not too far behind, not underqualified. You are exactly where you need to be, because when God gives the dream, He also gives the grace to walk it out one day at a time, one moment at a time. One decision at a time. Faith makes you organize what hasn't arrived yet. It makes you write the book before the deal makes you study the blueprint. Before the land makes you rehearse the speech, before the stage makes you pack your bags for a future not yet visible to others, and people may call it crazy, but heaven calls it obedience, because that's what faith does. It lets you see what isn't there and treat it like it already is. It lets you hold on to the unseen like it's already in your hand, because in the kingdom, belief precedes blessing, obedience precedes outcome, and worship precedes breakthrough. Every time you act in faith, you are casting another stone on the bridge between the dream and the build. Every time you risk and trust and obey and release and keep walking when others would sit, and speak when others would be silent, and show up when others would shrink, you are reinforcing that sacred pathway between what you imagined and what you will eventually experience. And just because others can't see it doesn't mean it's not real. They weren't given the blueprint. You were, they weren't. Handed the vision you were, and you don't need a crowd to confirm what God has already called you to carry. You just need the courage to walk. You don't get to choose how fast the dream becomes real, but you do get to choose whether you move or freeze, and faith is never wasted because God honors what you build in trust, even if it takes longer than you expected, even if it looks different than you pictured, even if it stretches you farther than you thought you could go, and it will, because faith doesn't let you stay where it's comfortable. It pushes you into rooms your qualifications didn't unlock. It puts you in conversations you didn't orchestrate. It aligns you with people you didn't even know you needed. And it provides what you didn't even think to ask for. Faith is not just the bridge between what you see and what you build. It is the only bridge. And if you try to reach that dream without it, you will fall through the gaps of insecurity, fear, comparison, exhaustion. But when you choose to cross with trust, to walk step by step, even when it shakes beneath your feet, even when doubt tries to pull you back, even when the winds of worry try to push you off, you will find that God is not only waiting on the other side, but walking with you the entire way. The soil of your belief is not just a metaphor. It is a spiritual territory where your expectations take root. It is the unseen foundation beneath. Every prayer, every vision, every whispered yes to something greater than yourself. It is not enough to plant hope in that soil and walk away. It is not enough to declare the dream once and then. Wait passively, as if God only honors the words but not the walk, because belief is not static. It is not just what you say with your mouth. It is what you reinforce with your choices, your posture, your habits, your daily obedience, even when no one sees, even when nothing is happening, even when the situation looks the same. And that soil which holds your faith must be watered, not occasionally, not emotionally, not only when you feel spiritual, but continually, faithfully, intentionally. Because belief without action is a seed without water. It may exist, but it will never grow watering. Your belief does not always look loud. It does not always feel dramatic. Sometimes it's just going to sleep without panic. Sometimes it's writing down the vision again when results haven't changed. Sometimes it's lifting up your hands in surrender instead of closing them in control. Sometimes it's praying when your heart is tired, trusting when your plans failed again, showing up when you'd rather disappear, giving when you feel empty, and forgiving when it costs you comfort. These are the quiet waters that soak the soil of faith and turn intentions into momentum. Because God never asked you to create the outcome, but He did ask you to participate in the preparation. And when you lie down to rest, your faith does not sleep. Your actions are still echoing in the spiritual realm. Your obedience still speaks. Your surrender is still active, because rest is not a pause from faith. It is a part of it. Is faith in motion? It is declaring that you trust God enough to stop striving, that you believe He can move while you're still, that you are no longer relying on effort alone, but on the sustaining power of His grace. Faith is not just a daylight activity. It continues in the shadows of your sleep when your body shuts down, but your spirit stays awake. And aligned, your rest becomes a continuation of your yes. Your trust becomes the water that keeps feeding the roots of the dream. There is a kind of sleep that is anxious and reactive, and there is a kind of sleep that is holy. It is the sleep of someone who has worked from trust, not fear. It is the sleep of someone who believes that their steps are ordered, that their future is secure, that their obedience is not wasted, and that heaven keeps building even when earth is silent. And that kind of rest is not laziness. It is confidence. It is warfare in a quiet form. It is worship disguised as stillness. And while others toss and turn from overthinking, you are lying still in belief that the God who sees all is working all things together, even now, even here, even in this pause. Because belief that is never acted on becomes dry, cracked, and weak, and the longer it goes without water, the more likely It is to become a memory instead of a movement. And sometimes the action is not what you do, but what you refuse to undo, refusing to talk yourself out of the promise, refusing to curse the ground before the harvest, refusing to retreat when you don't see signs, refusing to compare your soil to someone else's, and instead waking up each day with a new commitment to water what you've been given, no matter how small it feels, no matter how hidden it seems, no matter how quiet the process is, you water it. By your consistency, by your choices, by the way you get up again and again, with faith in your hands and vision in your spirit and gratitude on your lips, you do not have to force the fruit, but you do have to nurture the ground. You do not have to chase the rain, but you must keep the seed covered. You must keep the atmosphere of your mind fertile and protected, because the enemy isn't just after your dream, he's after your diligence. If he can dry out your faith, he can make you give up on what was actually growing underground, because breakthrough is not always visible at the surface until it suddenly is, and when it is, it will not be because you wished for it, it will be. Because you faithfully watered it, even in silence, even in the wait, even when no one clapped, even when your prayers returned with no echo watering. The soil is not glamorous, but it is powerful, it is sacred. It is what separates those who dream from those who build it, is what activates heaven's response to earth's persistence. And sometimes your action will look like stillness. Sometimes your obedience will look like closing your eyes and choosing peace. Sometimes your greatest act of faith will be to do nothing when everything in you wants to control and fix and manipulate and chase, but instead you let go and lie down and believe that God is not limited by your need to constantly act, because he honors rest when it is rooted in trust. And this is where faith matures, not in the moments you feel strong, but in the moments you choose not to quit, not to speak death over the promise, not to water your doubt instead of your belief, because every word you speak is water, every decision you make is water, every act of alignment is water. And when you choose to sleep in trust instead of stress, you are letting God cultivate what you cannot see. You are letting heaven do what your hands cannot reach. You are allowing your belief to remain nourished while you rest in peace. What you allow your mind to hold just before sleep becomes the blueprint. Your spirit reviews through the night, because the soul does not rest. Simply because your body does, the spirit is still listening, still absorbing, still processing, and the atmosphere you create before your eyes close becomes the internal environment that shapes your subconscious. It becomes the whisper that continues even after the room goes quiet and the lights are off. Your thoughts do not disappear. They descend deeper into your heart. They settle into your belief system and begin building or breaking something inside of you, even while your body lies still and unaware. You may think the night is passive, but it is holy. It is sacred. It is the unseen space where thoughts are weighed, where fears are either cast out or quietly reinforced, where peace is either invited or ignored. And what you choose to focus on, what you meditate on in those final moments, will either nourish your spirit or poison your sleep. When you dwell on fear, you feed it when you rehearse anger, you stir it when you revisit disappointment, you reopen it, but when you focus on truth, you anchor yourself when you meditate on hope, you stir faith. When you repeat promises, you build peace, because the spirit is not like the mind. It does not need bright light or noise to work. It works quietly. It digests what you feed it, and what you feed it at night becomes the fuel that either drains or restores you by morning. This is why it matters what you say in silence, what you whisper. When no one is around, what you allow to play in the background of your room and of your heart, because your last thoughts are often your deepest ones, and your spirit takes those thoughts and begins to organize them either into clarity or confusion, either into growth or into heaviness. And if the last thing you gave yourself was a screen full of comparison or a replay of worry or the echo of disappointment, then don't be surprised when your sleep feels heavy and your mornings feel burdened, because you are not just what you eat, you are what you meditate on, and your spirit needs better food. Meditation is not about emptying your mind. It's about filling it with something worth carrying. It's about choosing what gets to stay and what gets dismissed. It's about guarding the gate of your inner world and not allowing fear to enter without permission, and not allowing insecurity to settle where faith should live. Because what? You don't address in the light. You often carry into the dark, and the night is not the time to let chaos repeat. It's the time to invite peace to. Speak louder than pressure, because there's a difference between falling asleep exhausted and falling asleep aligned. When you meditate on truth, you give heaven permission to speak. When you meditate on the Word, you allow God's voice to be louder than your fears. When you close your eyes with worship on your lips, you don't just sleep, you rest, and when you rest, you heal. And when you heal, you hear more clearly. And when you hear more clearly, you begin to walk differently, because what you dwell on at night builds the strength or the sorrow of. The next day, your dreams are often shaped by your pre-sleep focus. Your mental clarity is often sharpened or dulled by your last thoughts. Your peace is not random, it is constructed. It is developed, it is nurtured in the silence when no one else is in the room. Some carry anxiety not because they live stressful lives, but because they meditate on stressful lies and repeat them in their heads like lullabies. They don't realize they've trained their spirit to digest fear before bed, and wonder why they wake up weary they haven't fed. Their faith, they've only fed their fears, and yet it doesn't take long to change the soil of your mind. It only takes one night of shifting your focus, one night of placing God's promises in front of you instead of problems, one night of reading something life-giving instead of scrolling something soul-draining, one night of gratitude over grievance, and the atmosphere begins to shift. The digestion begins to change. The inner system begins to detox, and you realize your spirit was never tired. It was just overfed with what didn't serve it. You don't have to be perfect to guard your mind. You just have to be intentional to choose peace over panic, presence over pressure, scripture over speculation, because every night is an opportunity to rebuild what the day may have broken, to strengthen what the day may have stretched, to reset what the world may have misaligned. And when you go to sleep, you are not turning off. You are tuning in. You are allowing your soul to echo back everything it absorbed. And if it absorbed confusion, it will echo chaos. But if it absorbed truth, it will echo rest. If it absorbed fear, it will stir unrest. But if it absorbed love, it will release calm. And the miracle of meditation is not that it changes the night, it's that it transforms the next. Morning, without you even realizing it, you wake up clearer because you slept in peace. You wake up focused because you fell asleep with purpose. You wake up whole because you allowed stillness to cover you and silence to teach you and heaven to hold you. Meditation is not an escape. It's a return. It's a return to center, a return to presence, a return to clarity. It's not just what you hear, but what you choose to hold and what you choose to release. And every night is a choice, and every choice builds or breaks your inner life, and your inner life will always shape your outer one. You were not placed on this earth to live in constant pursuit of survival. You were not born to live on a hamster wheel, chasing what was never meant to lead you. You were never meant to give your soul away in exchange for coins that lose their value as quickly as they're earned, because money was never designed to be your master. It was designed to be your servant. And yet so many spend their entire lives bowing to what they were created. To rise above, they run from job to job, from opportunity to opportunity, from deal to deal, not out of vision, but out of desperation, not from calling, but from scarcity. And in doing so, they shrink their divine identity into a transactional version of existence where value is measured by income and purpose is buried beneath paychecks. You were not created to chase. You were created to command, and that command does not come from pride or arrogance. It comes from alignment with purpose. Because when you know who you are and what you were born to do, you stop running after what you already carry, and you begin to attract the resources necessary to fulfill what God placed inside of you. Your calling was never meant to be enslaved by financial pressure. Your gifts were never meant to be discounted for survival. Your creativity was never meant to be auctioned off for comfort. And when you walk in divine purpose, you don't chase money, you invite it, because purpose is magnetic and what is assigned to. You will find you when you operate in what you were formed for. Money is not evil. It is not ungodly. It is not to be feared or worshipped. It is a tool and tools. We're meant to be held, not worshipped. It is a resource, not a ruler, a vehicle, not a destination. And when it is placed in the hands of someone led by purpose, it becomes power to build, to restore, to heal, to reach, to impact, to expand what God desires to do through you. Money in the hands of the purposeful is ministry. It is mission. It is legacy. But money in the hands of the aimless becomes a chain that looks like freedom, but feels like emptiness. And the reason why many feel heavy is not because they're lacking money, but because they're misaligned in purpose. You were not created to wake up every day wondering if your worth is tied to what you earn or if your future depends on how hard. You hustle because you were never called to toil under a system that disregards your identity in Christ. You were called to multiply what heaven gave you, to steward the vision that was planted in your heart, to build the work that echoes in eternity. And when you move from that space, money no longer becomes your source, it becomes your servant. It no longer becomes the finish line. It becomes the fuel, and you no longer panic when it's low or boast when it's high, because you are anchored in something that never fluctuates. Purpose does not panic. When provision seems delayed, because purpose knows that what is needed will come when the assignment is obeyed, and you don't need to chase what God has already commanded to follow you when. You are in alignment with heaven's plan for your life. The economy of man may rise and fall, but the flow of provision that follows divine obedience is consistent, faithful, and often. Unexpected, you may not know when or how, but when you move in purpose, you create space for supernatural supply that defies logic and doesn't require striving. And the beautiful paradox is that when you stop chasing money and start chasing purpose, money starts looking for you. It looks for the faithful, the focused, the disciplined, the obedient. It looks for those who are willing to plant. Even when the ground looks dry, those who are willing to say yes to God's call, even when it doesn't look profitable at first. Because faithfulness will always outlast flashes of success. And when you've been refined in purpose, you can be trusted with provision, because your heart will not be led astray by the numbers. Your joy will not be tied to the balance, and your identity will not shift with the size of the check. You will know who you are with or without, and that unshakable peace will allow you to walk into rooms where others perform, and you remain planted because your confidence isn't bought. It's built. You were created to rule over the resources, not be ruled by them. And the only way to do that is to anchor yourself so deeply in purpose that no amount of gain or loss shifts your posture, because purpose will keep you grounded when the money comes, and it will lift your head when it feels like it's missing, and your calling cannot be priced because it was already paid for in full by the one who sent you here. Your life is not about accumulation. It is about assignment. And your job is not just to earn, but to activate, to steward, to build what glorifies God and blesses others. And when you focus on that flow, you step into a rhythm where provision follows obedience, and you no longer have to trade peace for paychecks or sacrifice purpose for survival. And yes, the world will try to convince you that your value is only found in your income, that your status is determined by your salary, that your respect is earned by your possessions. But the kingdom of God does not operate by those metrics. It sees beyond appearance into assignment. It measures by faith, not fame, by impact, not image, by obedience, not outcome. And you were not called to impress. You were called to influence, and your finances are part of that influence. When surrendered to purpose, they become rivers, not reservoirs. They flow, they heal, they expand, they provide, and they leave legacy, not just luxury. You were never meant to live chasing what was already assigned to follow you. Purpose is your compass, not profit. When you walk in alignment with who you were created to be, money becomes a tool, not a taskmaster. It responds to vision, discipline, and obedience. True wealth is not what you hold, but what flows through you to bless others. Let your identity be rooted in purpose, not possessions. Let your efforts be led by calling, not comparison. When you stop chasing and start commanding, you'll find that provision was always waiting on your alignment, not your anxiety. Thank you.